the Thera Podcast. If you're a therapist, educator, counselor in training, or anyone interested in therapy, this is your epicenter for everything you should know. There are so many people in the world going through extreme mental and emotional issues, and we want to spotlight all the things we believe that work and the things that don't. They are wise sages, caring, intelligent, and are leaders in mental health counseling. The Thera Podcast. And here they are, Drs. Martin Wesley and David Whittinghill.
Well, welcome to the Thera Podcast. This is Dr. Martin Wesley. I welcome you, and I also welcome our co-host, David Whittinghill. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great, Marty.
I saw you just got a boat.
Yes, I just got a boat, a very fantastic boat, Cape Horn, 19, sitting in my driveway.
Well, you need to invite me and take me out, but you got to teach me to fish a little better. That's the problem.
That's not a problem. The invitation, I don't need to make one. The door is open.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'm
been a little chilly lately, though. I'll wait till it warms up just to hear.
Yeah. Well, it's better today. Come on.
Yeah, it is nice.
But we have a great group of colleagues with us here today, and I'd like for them to introduce themselves.
Yeah. Well, let's start with a couple that we've had before, and let's start with Dr. Rick Balkin. So,
hey, I'm Rick Balkin. I'm a department chair at the University of Mississippi in Leadership and Council Education.
Yeah, good to see you, Rick.
Good to see you, Rick.
My friend.
Yeah.
And we got Laura here, Dr. Laura Schmuldt.
Hi, I am Dr. Laura Schmuldt. I do not have a boat, but I am department chair. Great to be here.
Well, and you can't teach us to fish either? I mean, come on.
Okay. But you're welcome too, Laura.
Thank you.
Rick.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how big that boat is. I'm not sure about that.
The guy told me it holds 8 people.
Okay.
Where is this boat located?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just wanted to see where I'm going. See you soon.
And Dr. Lourdes, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lourdes Araujo, and I'm an assistant professor in a clinical mental health counseling program at Graduate University. And I'm happy to be here to pick our brains and talk about some good stuff. And I am an avid fisher, and I've done a lot of boating. So, David, hey, and I can teach Dr. Wesley how to fish.
Hey, great idea. I'll give you a ring.
There you go.
And then we got Demetrius Jifunza. Did I say that right? Jifunza.
Close, Jifunza. Close
enough.
Hey, hello, everybody. I am Demetrius Jifunza, and I am just happy to be here. I'm gonna say this with all sincerity that I'm a last year doctoral student and hopefully be finished this year. So, yeah, nice. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here, Demetrius.
Yeah. No, I've always been impressed by Demetrius, and I'm just glad he's joining us for this, and hopefully this will be the first of many. So, well, we wanted to talk about something that, again, we were discussing this right before we even turned on the record, and that is this is a scary topic. Why is this a scary topic? This DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why is this even a scary to talk about for us? In our field of counseling? Or is it mainly just a university setting, or is this just a scary topic to talk about in general?
I think it's in general now, Marty, because with the incoming president and the elimination of everything DEI, it has become not only a sensitive topic, but for some people, an outrageous one.
So it's politically charged right now on both sides. I imagine that's true. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's also that we have different perspectives on the topic, and depending on where you've been, what exposure you've had to it, to what exposure have you had regarding DEI as a professor in higher education? That looks very different than my clinical work that I do, the community I serve. And so it just depends. I think it's like a ping pong table where it goes back and forth. But I think also education has a great deal to do with it. Aside from the politics, aside from those types of conversations. And in my experience, it has a lot to do with where you've gotten that information initially. Where did you learn about DEI, and how has that shifted in your life and, the work that you do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think it also has to do with the popular narrative now, and how that's being conveyed. The narrative, in most respects, does inflict a sense of fear as well, especially in higher education, and how you're able to present information in such a way that does not receive a lot of pushback and backlash.
I agree, Demetrius. I'll just talk personally, but I've been afraid about talking about this topic in the past. And when it's discussed in a open forum that, here we are trying to be inclusive, but I have not felt inclusive, especially when it starts out with the white oppressor's language. I'm a white male, and unfortunately, sometimes I have been in some of those that I felt like I was thrown into the defensive immediately, and the only way to resolve some systemic issues in the past has been to demonize individuals within specific groups, and it sometimes, I don't know, it seems like to me that sometimes it has been a victim, we had to create victims and oppressors rather than working to bring people to that equity position in which they can compete and actually be able to thrive and succeed, which I thought was the intention behind some of the DEI programs. Anyways, just some thoughts there.
When I was a child, I saw the movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and there was a character named Dopey.
Mm.
And Dopey wasn't very bright. And so I understood the word for somebody who was a dope to be somebody who's not very bright. And then later on, I learned that you could purchase dope, and that was something different. And then I learned that, hey, that's dope. And that was actually a good thing. So I'm very cognizant that the meaning and interpretation of words is fluid. And where I think DEI started and where I think it ended are different places. I think the intention is good. The intention was right.
I agree.
The idea of a diversified, inclusive, and equitable places of education and work and society is a high moral ideal. But unfortunately, I feel that DEI got taken over and got turned into something else and was successfully used to convince society, not all of society, but a segment of society, that this is what DEI is. And, that's very unfortunate. But at the other hand, these are words. And I can play word games. I'm at the University of Mississippi, and I'm very proud of my university. I am. I understand that the university has a very rocky history. It has a horrible history. Rocky is not even a good word. It has a horrible history that it has worked to overcome. And they do work. So we used to have offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We now have offices of access, opportunity, and community engagement. And that connotes something different. Mm-hmm. But I believe that the work that we are doing, I know that the work that I am doing continues to reach the most disenfranchised individuals and populations in Mississippi. I run a grant that provides telemental health counseling across the state. We hit areas of Mississippi that don't have access to counseling and now do. And I'm very proud of that work. So when we were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I felt that the work that we were doing fit that connotation. And now we talk about the work of access, opportunity, and community engagement. And I feel like the work that we're doing also befits that as well. And if I have the legislatures on board with that, I'm very happy. I'm very happy that the legislators are supporting the mission of the university. That's a good thing. And, we had to adjust to new meanings of dope. We have to adjust. We have to do that at times.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I've stepped on any toes or not.
Rick.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just wondering could you articulate the meaning in the changing of those three words?
At this point, I'm going to stop our podcast just for a second so I can put context into what Dr. Balkin is going to talk about. He's going to reference a congressional hearing in which Elise Stefanik is going to be talking to presidents of the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, and MIT about rising anti-Semitism. I wanted to actually give you that clip before he talks about it.
Madam Chair, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to the gentlewoman from New York.
Dr. Kornbluth,
yes.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it is, if the
yes
speech
or
becomes,
no?
if the speech becomes conduct, It can be harassment, yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
So I'm going to speak to you from a very personal perspective. And some people will like it, some people won't. But it's just, I'm not speaking on behalf of my university. I'm speaking to you on behalf of Rick Balkin. I would say that I lean left in my ideology. And I was watching the congressional hearing with Harvard University, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm watching Elise Stefanik.
Yeah, Stefanik.
Yeah. Have her moment. I really paid much attention to her as a legislature, but I'm watching this. And prior to that, if you would have told me about, the academic institution kind of pushing an idea forward, I would have said, you know what? I've worked in academia for 20 years. I don't think that it's happening at this level. I think there's some individual professors that say things and do things and that get hit by the media, but I don't, and then I'm watching this, and I'm watching the discomfort of Jewish students. And I thought, I've spent 21 years in academia, but I've been in Texas, I've been in Louisville, Kentucky. That was a lot more liberal. And then I'm here at the University of Mississippi. And I had to go, okay, maybe I'm seeing this other side. And, if it's to the point that, look, I've never been at a university where there's a lot of Jewish students before, other than when I was an undergraduate and I went to the University of Missouri. Okay, we had a Hillel. All right. When I was at the University of Arkansas, not as many, but still some. But, my other universities I've been at, not so much. But now I'm watching this and I'm seeing the experience and I'm beginning to wonder, or even come to the conclusion that, okay, maybe this indoctrination is a little bit more prominent than I thought. Maybe maybe that is happening. And what I do know is a lot of Jewish students felt uncomfortable at Columbia University.
Yeah.
I know that. I saw it. I read about it. And I'm watching these educational leaders, these higher education leaders. I wasn't thrilled with their response, to be honest with you. And I was like substituting different populations. Like, if you were to say this about LGBT, would it be hate speech? And yes, it would be. And, if it's would be for one population, it's true for another. So I came to terms with the fact that how I was viewing this was skewed.
Yeah.
And I began to look more critically. Again, do I think that the words diversity, equity, and inclusion are to blame for this? No, I don't. They're words, but something transpired, where we began to confuse free speech and hate speech. And, but also on top of that, there is an oversensitivity to being able to have difficult conversations. I have colleagues that I speak with, and they agree with this concept too. We talk about this, campus being a safe space, and I don't believe a safe space exists. As a Jewish American, I do not believe a safe space exists. I believe that when this podcast goes up and people go, "Oh, the Jewish guy is talking," it's going to elicit a response.
Yeah.
All right. I think, and I think that it's that as soon as I open my mouth, people are going to make judgments, and it may go on cesspool, and people will says net, and people may comment, and it'll be ugly.
Yeah,
possibly.
It could be.
Yeah, it could be. I believe in brave spaces. I believe that once we put ourselves out there, people will judge us, and we may be able to protect people in our classroom, but we can't protect what happens once people leave our classroom.
Yeah.
See, I find that to be, and I'm glad that you shared that. You mind if I call you Rick or Dr. Balkin?
Please call me Rick.
Okay, Rick. I'm glad that you shared that. The thing is that, as you mentioned, that we can protect individuals in our classroom, right? Well, we can't protect them when they leave.
Right.
But now we're kind of handcuffed, and I'm speaking from the perspective of an expired future professor. Okay.
Yeah.
My hands would be tied if I'm trying to protect students in my classroom, because I'm limited now to what I can say and how I can say it. You mentioned when this goes up, it will initiate a response. Now, hearing from me is going to initiate a response that is not so healthy, or perhaps has the potential to be not so healthy, because the way the narrative have been viewed when it comes to DEI. And we can essentially be talking about the same thing. So that students that will graduate and go on, what are we giving him with? What are we equipping him or her with? I mean, as a doctoral student right now, my question to any university would be, how are you going to release me with a doctorate degree in society? Are you going to release me with the fortitude of confidence, or are you going to release me based on the fear enhanced by the political narrative? And that's something that we actually have to look at in higher education and move beyond particularly the fears that we may experience as, professors, because we are expiring, emerging new professors, new teachers, new leaders of, this society that's inflicted by what's happening right now. So I definitely commend you for sharing what you said, both from the personal perspective that you shared, as well as things that you perhaps see for coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is nicely put, Demetrius, and I agree, Rick. Sharing that in this forum or whatever space you have, I think is important because we might not see eye to eye, and those stories, like anything, right? The stories is what really makes difference, at least in my experience. But what I find is that we continue to, every school, every employer, you have to go through this DEI training or multiculturalism, what have you. And so even when you're watching that, what you see is not really what's happening. It's like, okay, we have to put these, videos out there. And then even the people in the video are like, wow, you're just like way out of line, with the way you're trying to share that information, right? So let's say you watch whatever is required for you to watch. And then how are you going to apply that? Like with my students, I'm colorblind, personally speaking, because I wasn't raised to be a racist. But then if you say that, then you're a racist, right? So I don't see color like that. And I try to, work with my students and work with my clients because I come from a humanistic, theory and position. And that is that I meet them where they're at, right? Do I have an opportunity to share DEI all day long? Right. But my perspective might not be seen as the appropriate way of, administering that or sharing that. And so I think that is kind of the struggle, at least I have, is that it's not, it doesn't mean the same thing. It's not the same training. It's not the same exposure. Just because you have a training and you get a certification, that I feel that doesn't make you an expert in anything. Right. I was at a conference and I was presenting, and the conversation was, if I want to know more about your culture, then I'm going to ask you, right? So I had a person in the audience that said, I'm so tired of you all asking me the same question because you want to know more about me, right? And I'm like, okay, so there you go. Just because you're going to reach out to someone doesn't mean that they're open or they feel bombarded by the same questions all the time to get to know your culture. And so how do you approach that? I delicately tried to answer that in the best way that I could, but still you leave there and like, wow, you can't ask a question. How else am I going to learn my culture? I'm all about going to people's houses, eating their foods, and I travel, I go where the people are. Right. But that's not, available all the time. Like we can't do that. So it's frustrating because in higher ed, you do every kind of survey, you do every training. And then when you get in the room with people, it's like, then it's the moral, like, where do I go? It's the morality of it. It's the value. It's your upbringing. It's your whole culture. It's very complex. And I'm sorry, there's not just one person on the planet that has the same information about DEI. And I think that's what makes it a little more complex.
Yeah.
Two politically incorrect counseling professors and therapists with never-ending experience and wisdom who are proud to be politically incorrect. You're listening to the Thera Podcast. Now, back to your hosts, Drs. Martin Wesley and David Whittinghill.
I think, the goals, let's just talk each word, diversity. I think I know that from all of us here, we all celebrate and want diversity. I think the issue for the diversity aspect is that counting all areas as diverse, or are we prioritizing specific areas over others? And I would argue that I have been in certain programs that do prioritize specifics over other areas. For example, race or ethnicity is sometimes highlighted over disability. As examples, and I would argue especially that diversity of thought is discriminated against in most universities. And I would say this is on both spectrums, from the right schools and the left schools. If, I'm not going to spend the time to define that, but at the same time, and I'll give an example. In my experience as a professor, chair, dean of programs, I have been hiring, people, counselors, counselor educators for many, many years. And I have been in programs that I've been in 4 programs, 4 schools. 2 of them discriminated flat out. One of them was a religious schools, again, KCREP accredited school, where I was, charged with hiring faculty. I remember specifically bringing in one faculty member. This individual was he was a person from Nigeria, and the provost explicitly said to me that he will never hire a Nigerian claiming that they were lazy people. No joke. Okay. Now, that I also brought in a friend, professor that was Jewish, and he's actually with us today, Dr. Rick Balkin, and trying to hire him. And I was told I could not because he was Jewish. I also brought in another friend, colleague, leader in our field who was a Sikh, and I was told we only hire Christians. But okay, so that's on the right side. And then I've also been in situations where I have been told in another university, which I'm not mentioning names, that I cannot hire more than one white candidate. And when there's been more than, when we were hiring 2, I was specifically told we could not hire an individual, not based on any merit, not based on any credentials, but based on race. And that is against the law. That is against the Civil Rights Act. And to me, that's the part of equity. We bring people to a place where they can perform and they can compete for those positions. But then race, gender, protected areas based on the Civil Rights Act cannot be used in hiring. And that's where we've taken it to the place where we've done damage, I think, at times.
Yes, I agree with you, Marty. And I think that's what Rick was speaking to when he said that we've taken it a bit too far. DEI was a great idea, but it was taken too far.
I'm curious, did they specify the reason? I know there is a vocal reason, but there's always a backstory to a reason. And I think that is really, when we talk about DEI, we have to be careful that we don't confuse what is favorable for institutions, and then they practice the favorable aspect of what they have done under the banner of DEI, because that changes the narrative of it. And that's why I said, was there a backstory? Because, I tend to find there's always a backstory, but we have to say popularly, like we can't hire this person for this particular reason. But let's really find out what the reason is. Some schools have a particular mission statement under the statement to protect. There's the mission statement, but then there's an authentic statement that's not highlighted. Exactly. And that is protected based on popular relationships, historical narratives with the schools, keeping the the historical outlook of how it started intact. And sometimes change is not something that everybody is favorable of. But yet, instead of speaking the truth, we grab the banner, and in this case, DEI, and we put all of that under the banner of DEI. And then we create this popular narrative and then have people vote on it. And now DEI becomes stigmatized, and we forget what it was actually invented for.
I agree with you, Demetrius. And I think that was in the case of this example that I just gave regarding we're not going to hire any more white people. In that example, the DEI, if it would have been, I think it was the administrators at this institution that mistaken the goals of DEI, thinking that it had to do with hiring, and it did not. It could not. Legally, it could not, but they didn't know that. And so they were judging based on, statements from the DEI office and the support of the executive committees, president's council and all, that was their goal. They thought that was a imperative on their part to actually make sure that we were hiring minorities. Again, even though in many cases that diversity did not extend beyond color, and did not did not encompass political diversity or religious diversity or diversity related to ability or age or, again, politics or, just multiple views in many ways. So very good point.
No, I just think it's important that the question that was always asked, what is DEI? And just like Dr. Lourdes had mentioned, that you're going to have so many different definitions of DEI and opinions of that. I think that a lot of times we tend to jump on opinions without research. And sometimes the research that we do look at is not authentic research. And we populate that. Looking at what's highlighted right now, to me, is a lot of opinions that lack substance and adequate research. I'm just saying from what has just happened here recently. Looking at it from a university standpoint, the question has to be asked, why is this so important? As a clinician, I practice this every day because I have a diverse background in the clients that I see. As professors, we practice this every day because we have a diverse background, or I would hope that we have a diverse background in our classrooms and especially in our institutions. So if we start from there, the work of servanthood, if you would, if we start from there and look at the definition from that perspective, then we move beyond just race and gender. We look at all perspectives of it, veterans, disability, etc. All of that, because if we tend to go the popular route, then what is it that we're actually teaching and preparing future students to become?
So let me push back on that a little bit. I'm a white male. I operate in my world, in our world, as a white male. And so I come out and tell you I'm Jewish. Then I enter into this part of diversity that controls banks in Hollywood. And that was a joke, folks. So
don't you have something to do with space and satellite moving?
we got our own space laser. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we still haven't pointed it at Marjorie Taylor Greene. We put it on Mrs. Goldstein's challah because on Friday night before the Sabbath, she forgets to turn her oven on and she can't warm her challah. So we take our Jewish space labor and we warm her challah bread for her. That's what it's used for. Nothing special. So it does exist, but it's got special use to warm bread. Anyway, but My point is that when I start taking this space as a minority, I could argue that a consequence is that I take time and space away from ethnic minorities. And, look, yes, there's anti-Semitism, there's hate, there's things that I deal with, in my world. I am not overtly discriminated against when I walk out of my house because of the color of my skin, because of what you see. I don't have that experience.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, and so, what am I supposed to do? It's hard being Jewish. You know what? It's hard being Black in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I have no reason to distrust police. I have no reason to distrust the medical system. All right. The whole purpose of IRB, the only ethics that are legislated in the United States, we don't legislate ethics on the Supreme Court. We legislate research ethics. Why? Because of the Tuskegee research study, where Black men were never told and never treated for syphilis after the presence of penicillin.
Right.
That went on for over 40 years until the whistle was blown in the early 1970s. And so that's not part of the Jewish experience in the United States. And I'm very cognizant about who we need to hold space for.
Yes.
And, when we're talking about diversity in academia, we're not talking about a lack of Jews.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of Jewish academics. All right. I don't have, here in Mississippi, we don't have a lot of Jews saying, hey, I don't feel represented by the mental health professionals I'm seeing. But I will tell you, we need Black clinicians. We need Black counselors in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reach the Black population better. And we need the Black population to trust mental health clinicians. And that happens better when we have more Black counselors.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Isn't our focus where we get it off of the intersectionality, and we focus so much on the larger, broader issues sometimes where we don't even get to know the individual person sometimes. I at least I see that so much where it seems like we sometimes even create divisions based on that when we're really not looking at the individual person. For example, I'll throw this example out there just because it's part of our counseling program, and I'll throw it out. But the idea of the NBCC Minority Fellowship Program, I don't know, and I could be wrong, but is there many white males part of that? Now, I know, being from Appalachia, that there are many people that have never had any generational wealth of any kind, that would be very, appreciative of some type of award that would be able to help them to be able to serve their own community in Appalachia. And yet they specifically, state in their criteria that they prioritize specific groups rather than looking at the intersectionality of of all these aspects and looking at the individual, which is what I thought equity was about. We have instead stereotyped individuals based on these larger categories.
To your point, Dr. Wesley, and I don't know how the room feels, but I feel I'm discriminated against, and a lot of people do, because you're checking a box.
Yeah.
I have talent, I have experience, I have a lot that I bring to the table, and I can check a box. But I mean, for many that I've talked to, it's you're discriminating because you're checking a box. You're not looking at the person that's sitting, you're a great educator. You'd be great for our university, but I got to check the box. And so, I take offense to that, as an Hispanic woman. And that, and I talk to colleagues all the time. I talk to counselors just like, why did you get this job? Obviously, it was on merit. I mean, you can't just have somebody, teach that doesn't have the skills. But at the same time, we talk a lot and it's that conversation like, gee, I wonder if they hired me because I spoke Spanish, or maybe they hired me because I, I'm checking the box, whatever that is. And so that's, I don't know. I think that that's disheartening, and it's changed a lot, I think, over at least maybe the last 10 years, 15 years, when people, come on, you spend a lot of money to get your your degree, right? And you bust your behind to get through school, to pay a lot of money. I'll pay my student loan for the rest of my life, probably. But I want it to be based on my education. I want it to be based on a lot of things. And it could be because I'm a Hispanic woman, but I also want it to be about my merit and what I sacrificed to get here, and not feel like, the conversation is about, you were hired for that, checking that box.
Yeah.
Not only, but I don't know.
I definitely get the idea of that box, checking that box. But sometimes I look at it slightly different because sometimes checking that box is letting you know the type of experience that I'm bringing. I am coming fully equipped with merit because just like you mentioned, Dr. Lourdes, with the credentials that you have and that you bring, that's it. But at the same time, though, I'm bringing this experience as well. I'm bringing an experience that sometimes you may not even know until you actually talk to me and get to know me. There are experiences that I'm able to bring into spaces that other individuals may not be able to bring into those spaces. As one example, one individual may be able to talk more openly and candid with former felons than someone who has never gotten in trouble. They bring that to this space along with a degree of education that is required, for others to bring. So when we talk about experiences, and it was stated, the space, holding the space, that space, it's more important, as I see it, what we're going to put in the space, how we are going to fill this space. And what we put in that space is going to determine not just who that person is, but who brought that person in. And so as we look at it, when the question is asked, was I hired on my merit or just who I am? Or was I hired on, as you mentioned, Dr. Lourdes, that I'm able to speak Spanish as well, and the background I come from. And then for me, am I hired just because I'm African American, and then I can hold space for that, and it can be quoted, and the name can be set there and say, hey, we want this grant funded because we do have a number of African American men, we have a Hispanic population, we represent the Jewish population. None of that, matters up until someone clamors about my space was taken.
Right.
You know what I mean? We hire people and we say we hire the best candidate. You of course you hired the best candidate because we went through the hiring process. You read my resume. Evidently, it makes sense to the person I hired. I'm teaching the classes, etc. But then when the minute somebody makes noise and says, I did not get the job because of this, now we have to go back and revisit everything. And now we throw in policies and DEI arguments and everything else. And we lose the substance of what we're here for. Granted, yeah, I agree. I don't want to just have somebody hired just because we have to fill a quota, because I'm concerned about who's going to teach me. I'm concerned about who's going to teach my children. But I don't want to hear the same argument when we hire somebody that is more than qualified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good point, Demetrius.
Yeah.
David, I'm wondering about you too, in the sense that a person like yourself and me and others, but I'm mainly talking about old people that bring in a lot of experience. I mean, you've got not only, counselor education experience teaching at universities, but also, a wealth of information and connections that are pretty much unmatched based on your, time at NBCC and so forth. Do you feel, if you were seeking a position today, based on your age and all and experience, that you would be seen differently, or that people would seek you out if you were available?
That's a really good question, Marty. Right now, I have the sense that if I was to re-enter the counselor ed profession in a full-time position, I would be behind the 8 ball because I am white and old.
White old. Okay.
Now, I am very aware of my white privilege, and I realize, like Rick was talking about, I don't have to worry about the police, my medical care. I have so much privilege, and I know that through my marriage to my Hispanic wife. However, taking all that into consideration, when I'm viewed by a committee, I'm viewed as a white male. And I have trepidations about that because of my experience with DEI in the past.
Yeah. So you felt that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've experienced that. Yes.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you're talking about institutions that are looking for certain criteria, whether it's, I remember I was on a rabbinical search committee one time, and the congregation basically wanted a young, energetic rabbi with 50 years of experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but you mentioned, like, what about the NBCC minority fellow? What about this university wanting, not being able to hire a Jewish professor? At some level, I don't have a problem with that. A private university can do that. And look, not only do they, we have a mutual interest here. They don't want to hire somebody they're uncomfortable with. I don't want to go anywhere where I'm going to be uncomfortable. Thanks for putting it out there front and center. You have a mission and you don't see how I fit it. We're good. That's your right. NBCC, they are not a not-for-profit. I'm sorry, they're not a nonprofit. They're not a 501c3. They are a not-for-profit. A not-for-profit, like a religiously affiliated hospital organization, Baptist Medical, Jewish Hospital. All right. Those are not-for-profits. And you know what? NBCC can say, here are the social causes we want to put our efforts into as a not-for-profit. And they're allowed to do that. And instead of, going, that's discriminatory, I'd rather say, thank you. Thank you for putting your efforts into these areas because they're needed. Who knows? Maybe one day, if I hit it big, I'm going to start a scholarship at my university. And you know who I want to go to? College students taking jiu-jitsu classes. If you're a struggling college student, but you're training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I want to pay for your education. All right? Now, some people might go, I can't do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It hurts my joints. That's not fair. I might have a physical disability. It's my scholarship. I get to say who I want to fund. And if I want to fund Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu college students, then that's what I get to do, because that's important to me. And I like what martial arts teaches, and I want to give those kids a chance to get an education. So, but I think that we've become a little oversensitive when we say, I'd like to focus on this area. I'd like to focus on this population. If this
let me push back here, Rick, if you don't mind. I agree with you in a way, but here's the difference. I would say two things. One, we're not talking about in the case. I'll just go first with the case of the NBCC Minority Fellowship. That is a SAMHSA grant. That is a federal grant that is brought to you by the United States of American people, taxpayers, and
they gave it to a not-for-profit for their mission.
I know, but you have to, in any time you take money from the federal government, you have to abide by certain laws. And according to, and that follows the Equal Opportunity Act and the Civil Rights Act, which means that they do not discriminate against individuals based on race or ethnicity. Now, yes, schools, religious institutions have been given a waiver. But in some cases, now, of course, NBC said it doesn't fit that. But say in the religious schools, in the what I see as discrimination there, the problem is not that they can't. The issue is that should KCREP or should our accrediting bodies be putting a stamp of approval on that? Again, so to me, there's two issues. One, again, being a federal grant, there is laws that they have to abide by based on accepting those monies. And second, when it comes to schools discriminating, I agree with you, Rick, that, at least rigidly, religious schools at least say they do, and they do discriminate. I'm not saying all of them do, but some. They're very specific. They only hire people that get their doctrinal statement. Whereas sometimes other institutions are not open about this discrimination, and they do discriminate, especially based on ideology.
But the thing is with that, and I agree with both points, but I want to stand in the middle here. One of the things that I see, like, which is difficult and can cause some concerns, is that you have one institution that is able to offer a grant of whatever they want, as far as the imagination can go. But you have another institution that would like to do the same thing, but now they have been placed in the position to where there are certain things that they cannot teach, certain things they cannot offer. If that happens, they can lose funding. So yet it takes away the freedom of, well, this is what I want to offer the grant for. Because if I offer the grant, or if I even teach this right here, now I'm at risk of funding being cut. I'm at risk of people losing their jobs. I'm at risk of even being jailed for teaching let's just say it, a history that is important, that is used as a stamp or a punchline, but not allowed to be further investigated and shared. So we have that difference. And so now when we talk about that, I like to think of just the, what I like to call it, the justification of intellectual discrimination. Mm-hmm. And it's legal to do that. So when we have the clamor of, well, listen, this is not going to work. We need these programs. We need DEI. We need the Civil Rights Act to stay intact. Not because it said that certain individuals are handicapped and cannot make it, but more or less when we have those that are very much qualified, there's so much pushback just because of, well, I don't want you to teach this, or I don't want that. And these are coming from not private institutions, but going back to the popular narrative, I would just say in general, it's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we sort of think about wrapping this up, again, I don't know if we've really come to conclusions. I think we have at least, that what I appreciate more than anything, and if anything, I hope could be applicable to other institutions, is just the openness that we have and the respect we have for each other. And some of my fear is that while we all agree with some of the intent behind DEI, sometimes it has brought about situations in which we have not had open discussions because we talked about, let's say, microaggressions, and we're afraid of saying things because we're afraid of offending someone. So we clamor up and don't talk. Whereas in a situation like this, where I'm with colleagues and people that I have the utmost respect, I learn from this. I'm able to dive into your world, and I'm throwing out, in a sense, or I think all of us could say something that may be viewed as inappropriate, but you're accepting that as bids for connections instead, and and allow me in to learn, and vice versa. And I just feel like sometimes we're there to correct people and shut them down before getting to know them as a human being.
I think that's important, Dr. I'm sorry, you say something, Demetrius? I think it's important, where you're getting your information and how open universities are. I mean, I have no complaints where I teach and what their philosophy is, and how they approach this, because one thing that they are is open to a discussion. I mean, they're constantly putting surveys out there. They're like, hey, we're lacking these kinds of clubs to meet these kinds of, initiatives. And so I think that that's important, that you at least have, the representation, the conversation, always be respectful. But, not every university approaches it that way. And I think it has a lot to do with, where you live, right? I mean, I grew up in Miami. I was born and raised, and I teach in Iowa. It's very different, right? Yeah. And so, but I have the opportunity to bring that culture, to bring that perspective, right, from my point of view. And the fact that the university is accepting of that I'm able to share that information, right? We're all learning DEI. It might look different on your platform as it does mine, but I think the constant conversation, and most importantly, that they're open to have a conversation like we're having here, like to be open, but to be really open. Like you can freely talk about what you want to, share or digest, right? And that you don't feel like you're walking into another room where it's just a constant, arguing or misunderstanding, or this is what this means to me. Like, listen to people, listen to their perspective. I feel that if you do that, if you're open with it, you have, the opportunity to grow, to say, oh, wow, I heard that in that podcast and I got something from it, and I can share that information because that makes sense, right? We get too in our bubble, and we don't want to be accepting of other people's opinion or perspective, regardless of where you come from. We have to at least have, the ability to communicate in a so-called safe space.
Mm-hmm. Good point, Artis.
Definitely. No, I think it's, well, first of all, I thank you for creating this space. And I'm happy to be here among, everyone here. I can definitely say, for me, I think that the great place to learn is from differences while celebrating those differences. And when you're able to talk openly and share ideas and share perspectives, I think that enhances more growth, but better all, a better individual. I mean, I don't know, just speaking for me, going back to that box, Dr. Lourdes, I don't like being locked up in a box labeled, because there's so much more about me. But if I am placed in the box, at least open the doggone thing and see who's in there and what I got to offer. That's the perspective that I like. So, yeah.
100%.
Thank you for that, Demetrius.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
seems like in a quest to become a more open, inclusive profession or even society, we ended up excluding folks. And, I think that's where the pushback is. Or perhaps, perhaps there's just too many victims. I don't know. A lot of people, tend to think that they're victims. And I look at them and go, that's interesting. People are really sensitive right now. And, to the, that's, I think that's part of the issue. And I'm sure somebody will listen to that statement and go, oh, he's talking to me. Are you saying I'm oversensitive? Yes. If you're upset about that statement, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Why not? I'm just going to double down on that.
And that seems to go against everything we are as counselors. I mean, we've got to move beyond that.
What? Sometimes as counselors, coping means toughening up.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate to say that, but sometimes, maybe that's the Jewish part of me. Oh, you think that's terrible? Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Where I think things changed also during COVID. You can see the difference between pre and post COVID, like the amount of mental health counselors that saw folks that they'd never see before. And I think that was an opportunity to get to know our clients better, their diversity, right? Because they were in a place where, sometimes you didn't have a choice, and to be able to be open about that. And imagine if we had that space where somebody can come and tell you, as counselors, we have to be ethical. I get that. But it was a space that we don't have a lot of, where somebody can come and talk to you and be open about it. And in that moment, regardless, you have your counselor hat on, right? But in that moment, you're like, wow, that makes total sense outside of that counseling center, right? You're just thinking about what's being brought to the table, and you can be 100% honest, even if you set your boundaries as a counselor, right? But it would be great to have a space like that where there wouldn't be any repercussion about like, well, this is how I really feel, and you're right or you're wrong, because in that space as a counselor, as a client, you could do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. What about you, David? Some last closing summation here. What are your thoughts?
Last closing summation is that I believe the current administration has gone a little bit too far and heavy-handed with a merit-based society.
Okay.
And skipped and gone about it too quickly without thinking out all the aspects and all the turmoil that taking that approach will cause. When you're asking other individuals to identify people who have been hired because of DEI, I think that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's being done today.
Yeah. I have some of the same fears in the sense that, while we can identify some issues with DEI, I'm also really fearful for those that, we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of aspect. An example of inclusion that I'm concerned about, for example, is those that are disabled that really need that equity part where they're able to be competitive and to bring them to the table to be able to work in our society. And this, it may be stripped from those individuals. And so that's a fear of mine as well. So. Well, great discussion, guys. I'm looking forward to maybe we need a part 2, 3, 4, 5 on this one because there's so many aspects. Rick, you're going, hell no.
Hell no. Yeah, yeah. I have no idea if I want this one posted.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that. But if nothing else, let's get together and talk about it, but not necessarily with the microphones or recording anyways. So
I thought this was helpful. It's not often you can, be in a space like this where you can talk about things that are very, very current, that it affects us as educators and counselors. So I appreciate you putting this together, Dr. Wesley, and I love the company here and what you brought. And I learned from each of you something, so I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
all right. Well, have a good one.
Okay.
You've been listening to the Thera Podcast. If you're a therapist, educator, a counselor in training, or anyone interested in therapy, this is your epicenter for everything you should know. Dr. Martin Wesley and Dr. David Whittinghill are counseling professors and therapists who have endless knowledge and wisdom. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can find our website at www.therapodcast.com. Find the show on all the major podcast platforms. And if you'd like to email Wesley, send it to wesleyphd@gmail.com. Take care and see you next time on the Thera Podcast.
Nice.
So I've employed this year. I have 15 GAs.
Well, how about I do this? I'm at the point where I'm completing the dissertation now, but I would definitely love to come support whatever you have there on any type of speaking engagements or anything that you do have. I would love to be a part of that.
Hey, thank you so much. And
Demetrius is an advocate for many different things. Look, he's been on, what is it, Pod Save America or something like that on HBO.
Pod Save America, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna stay in touch, and and let's talk about forgiveness, because
Definitely.
I've done a little bit in that area. Got some research articles. I've done a lot with Black trauma and forgiveness.
Yeah, awesome. That's told you. I knew it. I would have had something that I can. There was something that I can quote you tremendously amount of times doing this podcast. So, terrific. Well, hey, pleasure to meet every one of you again. Good to see you again, Dr. Wesley. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Y'all be well.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
What do you think, David?
It'll be an interesting podcast.
Yeah.
It didn't get down to the nit and grit I thought we'd get to.
No, me neither, actually. Yeah. But maybe that's not a bad thing, you know.
Yeah.
We made general statements, but nothing really, getting into it, like you say.
Yeah.
It would take hours to go through this in a real detail anyways. I tried to really prepare. I had probably 50 questions and I didn't get to, I don't think one, maybe two. I don't know. And I had so many different areas, but.
You're not planning to work for NBCC anymore, are you?
You don't think saying some of that? Oh, I have a feeling they're being shut down, or that they need. Well, I know they are. What am I saying? The grants just stopped everything. He just shut down everything. Yeah. But I imagine they'll restart. But they're going to make sure it's cleansed from any of that in it. I have a feeling it's going to be. We're going to see soon the counseling fellowship instead of the minority fellowship.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with Kylie, but she is not, she's not posting NBCC stuff on Facebook anymore.
Really?
Yeah. It's just time spent with family. So I'm wondering if she's walked away.
Interesting.
Or pulled back.
Yeah. Any other areas that you thought about? I didn't think anyone said anything. I started it out more controversial, saying white privilege and things like that, I think, than anyone. But I don't think it was that over the top. I was,
No, I don't think there's an over the top statement made.
Yeah, I don't either. So anyway, I can put it together and I can send it out to everyone, give them a day to review it to make sure.
Sure. Let Rick listen to it though.
Yeah, he's more concerned. Yeah. I thought he was being so careful. He's being too slow because he was so careful.
Yeah. That's the way I felt also.
Yeah.
Because Rick's usually off the chain.
Exactly. And he was being so careful and so slow. I was going, holy crap, I need to plug him in. His batteries are going low.
Yeah, I was, the whole time I was thinking, I wish Carl was here to punch him a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Jerry. Jerry seems to too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it was good. We'll see how it goes. So,
yeah. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah. Need to shut it off, I guess.